Have you ever met a stranger who you never saw again that you still think about on occasion? I had just gotten my license and was bringing my friend home. We live in the middle of nowhere and he was about a 35-minute drive away. On the way to his house I saw a woman walking on the side of the road, desperately looking for a ride in the cold rain. It was late at night and my friend told me picking someone up was a bad idea, so I didn't. On the way back from his house, I saw her again. She had walked a couple miles already at the point. I decided frick it, turned around and asked her if she needed a ride. I took her 15 miles. Yes, she was going to walk 15 miles in early March, in the rain, to her town. She was such a cool person. She had some amazing tattoos, and I found out she used to follow Green Day around on tour in the mid-90s. Just awesome. And a really sweet person. She was at the hospital getting some kind of treatment for lupus, and her alcoholic husband abandoned her there with no ride and no phone, so she just decided to start walking. She insisted I drop her off a few blocks from her house, so I did. She didn't have any money, and I told her certainly didn't want any, but she found a crumpled up dollar bill in her pocket and gave it to me anyway. I'm not sure why, but I never spent that dollar. I felt like it wasn't mine and that maybe I'd see her again and give it back to her. I keep in my glove box still, 8 years later. Dude, you need to find a better way to store protect that dollar. I keep seeing the scene from Pulp Fiction with the watch and thinking someone is going to find that dollar someday and spend it and you're going to be all like that dollar. You spent that dollar that I have been saving all these years and them looking at you like you're mental. I was flying overseas for a 2-year deployment. I was stuck at the Atlanta airport for several hours as a pretty nasty winter storm was raging outside. I was not in uniform, but I did have my military haircut and demeanor going. I decided I would head over to a little airport bar for a smoke and a drink. The place was empty. I sit down at the bar and mindlessly stare at the TV. I sat there for a good 20 minutes alone when this very old man approached and sat down right next to me. My first thought was along the lines of, why is this weird dude in my space when this entire place was empty? He orders a drink and then bluntly asks me what unit I am with, clearly smelling the soldier on me somehow. I, of course, don't answer him, but I just casually tell him I am in the service and I am waiting for a delayed flight. Curious, I ask him how he knew I was in the service. He said, son, I served in the army for almost 36 years. I can spot you guys a mile away. We start talking army. He was drafted in 1942 and sent to Europe in 1943. He was part of the invasion of Normandy, landing on Utah Beach in the first wave led by Theodore Roosevelt Jr., who was killed in action that day. He decided the army life was for him and stayed the duration of World War II in Europe. After the war, he became a drill sergeant and trained new recruits. He was deployed to the Korean Peninsula and participated in several key battles in the Korean War. He then did 5 tours in Vietnam from 1964 all the way through to 1972. On his last tour, he was shot 4 times by enemy fire and lost his eyesight in one eye and the use of his left arm. He retired in 1977 as a command sergeant major. It was easily one of the most fascinating and engrossing conversations I have ever been a part of. This guy is a freaking legend in my book. 3 freaking wars under his belt and right in the middle of some of the heaviest fighting the country has been involved with. We sat there, just the 2 of us, in that bar for several hours talking and laughing and enjoying life's stories. Finally, it was time for me to head out and catch my flight. I could have talked to him forever. He insisted on paying for my food and drinks. As I stood up to walk away, he slowly stood up and gave me what I would call the sweetest, manliest hug I have ever experienced. We just stood in this bar hugging each other for a while. He told me that he was proud of me and all our young troops, and he told me to keep my head down and to come home safely. He reached in his pocket and pulled out one of his old challenged coins from his last days of active duty and handed it to me. He said it will bring me luck as nobody will frick with you while you have that coin in your pocket or I'll haunt their butt when I'm dead. He shuffled off into the crowd and disappeared. I have carried that coin in my pocket every single day since I met him. Thanks, Jack. You are looking at the stars. Random Latvian guy wanted to play football, soccer, with me. I want to be more open with strangers, so we played. The talk afterwards was special. He talked about his job, He is a repairman who sailed around the world repairing motors and crap, and he talked about him being on the run from the Latvian police on drug charges. How bad Latvia really is and how he just wanted a friend here since he only knew his sister and her husband. This was a mind-boggling conversation as I don't know if he speaks the truth or not. However, I want to believe he's not lying. We wrapped up our stuff, said goodbyes and went on our bikes heading home. He apparently took a wrong turn and caught up with where I was riding. With his thick Slavic accent I hear my friend I had the biggest freaking smile on my face. Can't remember last time someone called me their friend. Wonder where the bastard is now. Such is life. Bit of a weird one, but when I was about 9, I remember being at a fair where they were giving out free samples of pies. A French guy came up to me and asked in broken English, why you take if you no give money. I replied by saying they're free and then walking off. For some reason, I always regretted not giving a better explanation. This guy probably didn't understand and therefore didn't get any free pie. He probably ended up running Monopoly around the stalls stealing things, yelling they're free. When I was 17, my dog got out and was hit by a car. A man, not the driver, found him in the street and called my house. I was home alone and ran outside where he died in my arms. The guy who found him was driving an HVAC truck and clearly had no experience with consoling teenage girls, but he stayed with me and for an hour on the side of the road while I called my parents. Cried hysterically with snot and tears streaming down my face. Yelled at rubberneckers and was basically inconsolable. He would give me awkward pats on the back to help calm me down until my mom came. Months later, I was working at the grocery store and he came through my line. I recognized him right away, but wasn't sure if he recognized me. Before he left, he made eye contact and gave me a knowing nod and half smile of acknowledgement. He's my favorite stranger. This guy dressed in a fancy suit sat down next to me, an average college student, on the train and we started talking. This is what I learned about him. He had no family growing up. At a young age he sold drugs, street raced for drug money, was shot twice and cut with a knife multiple times, ran from the police for a year, did time in jail, was in the pee business for drug money, realized he was taking his life on the wrong path, went back to school to get his GED, finished with a 4.0, now works as a mechanic working on top of the line modifications to expensive cars. He was going to the city to propose to his SO with the ring he just purchased. We ended the train ride with a bro hug. I'll probably never see him again, but I'm glad I met him. Using elements from this story, you could write a movie for most common genres: action, drama, inspirational, suspense, romance. I was walking to the bus stop in middle school and a woman walked by with her dog. The dog jumped at me and the woman pulled him back and said, "Yes, she's pretty, isn't she?" It was a small thing, but after being relentlessly bullied at school for being ugly looking like a boy, it meant the world to me. 9 years later and I still remember. My friend and I were in a club and started chatting to a guy who looked really nervous at the bar. Turns out he was in town because the next day he was going to meet his biological father for the first time. He was very nervous and excited and kept wondering whether what he'd done with his life would impress his father and more importantly whether he'd like his dad or not. I never saw him again, but I really hope it all went well for him. He was a lovely guy. Very pretty girl in line for Goliath at Six Flags, California. I was a very shy 16-year-old, and she struck up conversation with me. She was visiting from Texas on a field trip or something. She talked to me the whole way through the line. She was really upbeat and very endearing, and I found myself entranced not just by her beauty, but by her openness and little quirks. She had mentioned her friends left her by herself, so she got into a car alone, on the far side, and looked at me like she wanted me to join her. I didn't. I let the gate close and waved with a stupid smile. She looked very disappointed. I'll never forget how sad she looked that I didn't get the hint. I could practically feel her heart drop, and I never saw her after. To that girl, I fell in love with you that day, but I was a dumb 16-year-old who didn't know what the heck to do in that situation. I'm 29 now and still, to this day, regret not getting in that car with you. Several years ago, I ended up sobbing in the Lisbon airport as I waited to board a plane. My boyfriend at the time lived in Portugal, and I was flying back to the US after a visit. I was sitting on the floor trying hard to cry quietly, and suddenly another girl my age appeared beside me and handed me a tissue. She put her arm around me and put her head on mine. I literally just sat there, crying in this stranger's arms, for several minutes. Finally I said, "Thank you," and she just nodded. She didn't speak English, it seemed, so we didn't talk. She sat with me in silence until it was time to board. I wish I had shown her more gratitude. I will never, ever forget that moment. Emotions don't utilize languages, because it's got one of its own. When I was about 16, I really wanted a red beret like the one Max had in Rushmore. I finally found one in NYC in this little stall in the village. It totally fit and everything, and I was super pumped. On the try and ride home, I was wearing it and my friends were messing around with me and just being mean, although I didn't particularly mind. Then I see this large black woman sitting across the aisle from us and she's clearly amused. So I ask, "What do you think? Does it suit me?" And she says, "I think you look great. Honey, only you can be you." Remember that. That one sentence changed my entire outlook on life and what I considered important in terms of the way I was perceived by other people. It really changed me for the better, especially as someone who had historically been self-conscious. I even wrote part of my college essay about her, and it was the essay I used that got me into the school I attend right now. For some reason in my memory of her, I always picture her knitting. I think you saw the Oracle from the Matrix. Honestly though, neat interaction. I was at the zoo with my boyfriend, and we walked by this guy. He was wearing thick black eyeliner, black lipstick, a top hat, long sleeve shirt and long pants, and carrying a black umbrella. He looked like he had never smiled in his life, and this was on a hot summer day, so I have no idea how he didn't die of heat stroke or something. So instead of staring like every other person there, I smiled at him as I walked past. When I looked back at him, he was looking at me, smiling. It made me happy to know that I could make him smile. He probably went home and wrote that crap in his journal. "Dear diary, your plan worked. We really do love eyeliner, black lipstick, and top hats." I even had one eyeball in me, despite being there with her boyfriend, and thus, Pete Wentz was born. As a 12-year-old kid, I was sitting on a bench at a Six Flags by myself. A random average looking guy in what I would guess is his mid-20s came up to me and said, "You will remember me for the rest of your life." Then he left and went about his business. That sucker knows how to play the game. 15 years later and I still remember him, and think of him about every couple of months. The long troll. I went on an early morning run in my neighborhood after a crappy night. I was feeling sorry for myself, until I saw this beautifully dressed, poised, middle-aged, black woman. I thought it was odd to see this woman, who was clearly dressed for some sort of party or banquet, out at 6:30 in the morning. As I got closer, I saw that she was crying. We were the only people on the street, so I stopped to ask her if she was alright. In between sobs, she choked out, "I'm sorry, sweetheart, I'm just having a terrible morning. My husband just told me that another woman is carrying his baby." All I could do was stammer out an apology and awkwardly hug her. She thanked me and pushed past, continuing to walk and sob. She had a beautiful name, but I can't remember it. I still think of her. She obviously lives somewhere in my neighborhood. This was over 2 years ago. I hope she's better off now. My heart sank at the ending. I'm leaving this thread. All it takes is one bad story. One time I was running down the street feeling kinda depressed because, well, I was 14. This guy came running on the opposite side of the street. He had really long hair and he was laughing like crazy. He looked at me and said, "Hey kid, don't be sad, be like me." He then tripped over a recycling bin, got up and ran off. Whenever I'm down, I just remember the running guy. That dude was Saruhi. When I was 16, I was visiting New York with a church group. We were volunteering at homeless shelters, at food pantries, at group homes, wherever. We were staying on Staten Island, so we'd take the ferry over to the train station and take the train station to our stop. On the train, I see this girl. She is incredibly cute. She's dressed all alternative, which was, at 16, my thing. And, Here was what really got me. She was carrying on her back her electric guitar bag. She was also reading. And while I'd love to say it was our band Could Be Your Life or On the Road or something super stereotypically teenage old for life, I haven't the faintest what it was anymore. But she looked up from her book, made eye contact with me, smiled and then went back to her book. For 3 stops I debated going over to her, striking up conversation, asking for her number, something, but I didn't. She got off the train and I never saw her again. I managed to learn something from that moment, though. While I've had that feeling again, that abiding terror of going up to a stranger you think is attractive or cute or seems cool or interesting or whatever and putting yourself out there, I've never again succumbed to it. And it was through fighting that fear that I ended up meeting every single one of my girlfriends, including the woman who is now my wife. So thank you, Guitar Girl. You had more of an impact on me than you knew. I went to a WWE show in SD. For crap and giggles I had a Luchador mask on. As I was having my way to my seat, this kid starts to freak out. He starts to hug me and stuff, telling me he always wanted to meet a Luchador. He looked like he was 15, 16 and with a mental disability. I, feeling a little awkward, just smiled at him and went to my seat. As I was leaving him he says, "Love your mask." I stop and turn around and say, "You really like it?" He, with full glooming eyes, says, "Yes, I love it." And I took my mask off and said, "Well, now it's yours. Take care of it with pride and honor." I can't explain his face. It was just happiness. I went into my seat, enjoyed the show and then went to my home in Mexico. Never saw him again, but I think about that kid often. That's such a nice story. I bet you made that kid's week. Had an online friend that listened a lot to similar music years ago, before Facebook and MySpace etc. Lost contact with a guy and found a message in my old email by chance. I looked him up on Facebook. He has a very unique name, and found out he had died less than a month ago. Fricked up crap. I was about to visit his country by chance and figured out why not seek him out since we did get along and was a nice person. I feel sick just thinking about this right now. I had a similar thing happen. Used to talk a lot with a girl on this game that I played. At some point she had to go to the hospital for a risky spinal surgery. Never seen her again. It has been 4-5 years without a single sign of her being alive. I was driving, back 3 years ago, down a major highway when this car started driving next to me and I glance over and these 2 girls look at me at the same time. I swear it to this day that they mouthed, "Oh my god, he's so hot," as they did the little freak out jumpy thing that girls do. Anyway, I remember them very vividly because that was a huge boost in my confidence. Thank you ladies. Thank you. A similar thing happened to me while I was walking down the street. 2 attractive women about my age in a Jeep yelled out, "Hey sexy," and laughed as they drove by. It had the exact opposite effect on me. I was depressed for a week because I assumed they were just teasing. I played against this girl one time in a recreational volleyball league. She had a very pretty face and had an athletic build, but she didn't have any outstanding features. However, she was playing on a team full of great looking girls in bikinis and she was just wearing green shorts and a t-shirt. The other girls were all flirting with guys and dancing around while she just kind of stood in the back looking shyly at the ground. She was not very good at volleyball. In fact, before our second game our teammates all agreed to try to serve it to her so we would have a better chance of winning. We ended up beating their team pretty easily. Green shorts girl kind of sadly walked alone to her car and left while the girls she was playing with went over to the bar for drinks. It sounds dumb, but I wonder if my life would be different if I had gone up to her and asked her out to lunch or something. I still go back every Sunday to play volleyball, but I've never seen her there again. Thanks for making me sadder. When I was 13-14 I was waiting in front of the local church in the morning because me and a friend would ride our bikes to school. While I was waiting I suddenly heard a very soft "excuse me" behind me, so I turn around. I see an old lady who was standing there just smiling, and suddenly told me, "You truly have wonderful hair. I hope you're proud of it." I was baffled. I mean, I surely didn't expect that in my early morning. So I say thank you to the nice lady and my friend comes riding and asking me to hurry. I keep thinking I reminded her of someone. Why else would she say that? I never knew if I should feel sad or happy about meeting her. Told this story the other day. but it fits here too. I was at a Blink-182 concert a few years ago in KC. It was so freaking hot and we were packed at probably more than capacity. After having been standing there all day, my feet were tired. So, I was behind this guy. I just leaned forward and wrapped my arms around this short but really stocky dude. He just turned his head slightly to see this sweaty, bearded tired face of mine. I said, "Sorry man, I'm just really tired. Can I rest here a minute?" He said sure. So I laid my head down on his shoulder and rested. After a minute or so I figured it was time to be moving forward. Never found out that guy's name, but he was one of the most chill people I've met at a concert. Miss you buddy. Hope the show was as fun for you as it was for me. Not to be a dong, but resting your head on a strange, stocky man in front of you is a pretty bizarre decision. In August of 2011, my girl at the time and I broke up. I really loved her and was intent on marrying her, so my world crashed down around me. A few nights later, I randomly went to a neighborhood bar, and while I was having a drink by myself at a table on the patio, a tiny blonde girl plops down next to me and says, "Hey, how are you?" and sits down at the seat at my table. The patio gets very full at night and seats get filled, and my table had the last open one, and starts smoking. I know she didn't really care, but I was a few drinks deep and in a very bad place at the time, so I ended up dumping everything I was going through on her. Ended up breaking down at the goddamn bar like some cliche movie scene. But bless her soul, she stuck by me the whole time and consoled me, despite not owing me a goddamn thing. After an hour of losing my crap, I regained composure and ended up getting to know her. She had gone through a failed engagement about a year prior, and was now doing fine. It helped a lot that a stranger would go to such lengths to be there for me. At about 1 AM, about 4 hours after I'd arrived at the bar, she looked at her phone and said, "Oh crap, I've gotta go. You take care, you hear? You'll find your happiness, I promise," and left before I had the chance to get her phone number. I became a regular at that bar and have literally been back over 100 times in the past 2 years, but I have never seen her again. She helped me out of a real crappy spot, and I'll forever be thankful for it. Hopefully one day, I get the opportunity to buy that girl a drink. The only time I've ever been in an auto accident, it was about 2 years ago. The other guy looked to be in his 50s or so, was super chill about it, basically said crap happens, young blood, and wasn't the least bit angry about me taking out his passenger door. Actually, he looked and sounded a lot like Phil Jackson. Now that I think about it, haven't seen him since. No, but I dreamt about a girl when I was 7. In the dream we lived a whole life together. I woke very sad and cried for days. I've never forgotten her. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.